Welcome back. It's another episode of the Better Learning Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that we haven't talked about in a while, and it's been such a big thing as far as AI and the impact of ChatGPT that came out over a year ago, and we wanted to really look at how it's actually being used now and ways that it's going to be used in the future. So I'm going to pull in Micah Miner. Micah, how you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Yeah, and the audience will know, like, you've written a book and you do a lot of talks around the AI going to school and the impact of how to prepare students and teachers do that. Before we talk about that, though, I want to hear what was your journey? What was school like for you coming through as a student?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I didn't realize how privileged I was in a small town where I knew everyone. And my dad was a teacher. My mom had a daycare for only teachers' kids. So I knew everybody. And as I got older in middle school and high school, I realized that's not everyone's experience, right, Kevin? Like, some people really don't feel comfortable in school for a variety of different reasons. So as I learned more about how I felt connected and others didn't, I still swore I would never be a teacher. Like, it was not going to be what I was going to do at all. There's no money in it, right? But as I got towards undergrad and finished it and then went to grad school, I was like, wow, I had this program where I was working with some at-risk students in grad school as some side money as I was trying to do some graduate work. And I was like, wow, I actually think maybe I should do this. So I kind of changed in my early 20s to an education career. And specifically, I had gone to the city of Chicago, gone to college there, met my wife there, and we were pretty committed to being, urban environments. So I decided to take that on. And it's been a ride of 20 some years since then. So, but just realizing early on that not every kid has that experience was really important for me to realize that school needs to be different.
So what did that look like then? So now you're coming from a family educators, been surrounded by it all your life. What were the things that you were recognizing needed to be different?
That's a good question. I happened to have the benefit of marrying somebody who was African American, right? Which opened up a whole new idea of like perceptions and history, social studies, and the realities of different people. And I think learning how to engage and research different cultures that were different than my own was important. And then the second step behind that, Kevin, is actually transitioning that to relevant curriculum where the students see themselves in the curriculum. We have this statement, it was coined in the early 90s by a researcher, but it's like mirrors, windows, and doorways. So we always approach, I both oversee instructional technology and in social studies, but my goal is always to construct a curriculum where the kids see themselves in the mirrors. They learn how to look out the windows to how other people live and work and live their lives, and then build those bridges so that they can have doors of opportunity to connect. So that's kind of revisiting how, some of the things that we thought were important in our school experiences and realizing how to make it more universal and accessible to others who, broader, I think would be the term I would use for that.
Okay. So if you got into kind of more specifics or stories around that, kind of your early years into education, let's hear some of those teacher stories, and they're always great, right? I mean, everyone can relate to those.
Yeah. I worked as the department chair in the Juvenile Detention Center of Chicago. So I'm going to tell you a story, Kevin. There's an expletive in it. I was about 7 years in teaching, 6 years in at the time. And there was, I had students who I taught that were in the Juvenile Detention Center. It was the Chicago Public School inside the jail. And they were dealing with really serious cases. Whether or not they did it is regardless, beside the point. They were incarcerated and I was teaching them. So I had a kid, I was teaching U.S. history, teaching African-American history. I was closing on around Reconstruction era. I had a student look at me, said, "Mr. Miner, I don't give a shit about this because I'm about to face 15 years. And this education system basically doesn't care about me. So why the hell should I care about it? Right? What is knowledge to me now? What is knowledge behind bars?" And I knew that's not the first time a student has asked me that. Of course, I had been working on the south side of Chicago for quite a few years then at that point, but just not in the extreme situation of the jail. And I had not, he was right, Kevin. Some of the stuff that we have to learn as students may not be relevant, and especially in a situation where you're desperate to be treated like a human in such challenging circumstances for whatever I mean, I don't want to talk about anything, what they were being charged with, but being able to still be felt like you had human dignity left that was worth using. And I think those kinds of stories, as much as they broke my heart, provided me with an opportunity to reconfigure what learning and teaching could look like. And it drove me on the path towards figuring out a better way to do, secondary education and even K-5 and 6-8. So that's one short story of a broader narrative about how do we teach kids who don't feel like they're a part of society, who may or may not feel a part of a group that's in the how do we provide them with learning opportunities that give them the skills and are interesting enough for them to learn.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So, as that we have that as kind of context, where did your exposure come into AI, into more of the technical, getting into more of the technology and things like when did it start hitting your radar of like, hey, whoa, what we've been doing isn't gonna get where we need to be, seeing what's down the pipe?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've had a technology endorsement for over a decade. I had gotten it in late 2009 after my ed leadership certification for the state of Illinois. And I was like, it's probably important because Apple, you remember Apple, the whole iPads revolution, the world was going to change. I had kind of, and Google Apps for Education had just been launched. And I knew that there was going to be a lot of opportunity for me to build on student learning based on those tools. So that's kind of how I went that direction. And then it was about a year and a month, almost a little over a year ago, when I was in Apple Park visiting with my superintendent, my technology director, and he's a manager, so he doesn't have any teaching experience, and a few other districts. We were walking through their educational, state of the education, and we started talking about ChatGPT, which we had all heard of at that point. And of course, Apple wasn't in the game at that time, but they were just talking about implications. And I had already known. I was like, this is going to be almost, I don't want to be, largely epic about it, but it's going to be like, if some people are saying it's the fourth industrial revolution, some people are saying it's going to drastically change the world. It's not going to be like Apple iPads for, how iPads were supposed to change because those were app based. This is a fundamentally different, almost alien intelligence that we're going to have to teach our students how to manage. And then we also have to have learning be redefined, because if I don't need to know every detail, I still need to know how to be critical of information and misinformation, right? So I was like, I gotta start doing it. So I started writing a lot, and I pitched a book about a month and a half later to Times 10 publications, and they were like, we don't want to do AI. It wasn't, because it's scary, Kevin, if you're not in the space, right? There was a lot of other things in education, but the world had stopped. And then he interviewed me. The editor is a great guy, and he was like, you know what? Because of your balance and your background, I think you might be the only person we'd want to write the book. Because I am a district administrator, I've had school leadership experience, I've done technology coaching, I've been a department chair, I work in environments that have always been urban. And so I feel like what I say about it isn't just being a tech evangelist, Kevin. It's more of a pedagogically based.
You have the credentials to be able. Yeah, to be able to look at that technology and say, how does that apply exactly. What we need to do in the curriculum and teaching. So what are some of those things that now, like, that you thought were going to happen? I want to hear what you thought was going to happen, what actually happened, and then we'll talk about kind of the future after that.
Right. So the first time you dealt with it, and everybody was facing it, we were like, I got to be able to beat this thing, Kevin. This thing is not smarter than me. ChatGPT 4 hadn't hit the ground yet. And I was like, there's no way that this thing is going to be as overwhelmingly amazing as it was. Like, there's got to be a niche market. I know a lot of African American history. I know, niche history. I've done a lot of training on it. And it was still an interesting, grapple. So once you get over your ego, Kevin, you found out that, wow, now that I get to the fact that realizing it's just, it's a great text based. At that time, it was mostly text based. tool, it doesn't necessarily have any truth connected to the things that they say. It just, can teach students. It feels like it's real, but it's really not. It's like the best. There was a Chronicle of Higher Education article that was like the best bullshitter the world has ever seen, because it can make up stuff that sound convincing, but forgive my second expletive, but just generally speaking, it was a revolution. So after you grapple with that reality of like, wow, and the world isn't going to end because, we're not going to be a Chicken Little, screaming that the sky is falling every time. But I do think education has an apocalyptic. It seems like every few years, like the world is going to end. But then we have to start getting to the nitty gritty. Then we get to the details of like, okay, so what is a teacher-based uses of this tool, right? What are our use cases for teachers, and how can it help them improve their teaching? And then you want to transition that conversation to be, what are the student-focused uses that you could use, minding all federal and state local level laws and student data privacy and all the things that we want to be careful of as my instructional technology hat goes on with cybersecurity and stuff. How do we protect that? How can it help the student be a better student? How can it help the teacher be a better teacher? And once you get to the point where you're able to admit that it's not just a plagiarism tool, it can be used as instructive AI. It doesn't have to be generative AI that just makes things up and completes exercises, right? Then we can get to a place where we can start addressing basics, academic policies, Kevin. Like, what are our academic policies and procedures? And that's, I think, a lot of my last few months. I've done like almost 22, 23 different presentations throughout the country. And I think one of the things that I've learned is we're learning, Kevin. The educational community is being open-minded in many ways. But if we can get to the conversations about like applications of academic policies, about in high schools that are very large that I deal with in the Chicagoland area, maybe each department, like maybe the humanities department or the history department, they might have their own version of what that looks like to make sure students are accountable to their work, but it can be as a booster for their students to be able to learn. Maybe it's a way for teachers to apply it to differentiate. And then we can get to really good conversations about its implications. So that's kind of, Kevin, where I want to thank the education community for being flexible and learning how to respond.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Now when I talk to people, I think the first reaction was, what are we going to do about it? It was first looking at as, how do we solve the plagiarism issue that's right. coming here? And that almost like overwhelmed of like, okay, well, what do we do now type of thing. Right. And then the next phase was teachers starting to use it and be like, ooh, this is actually pretty impressive. How can I start using this like to help me as a teacher? And now it sounds like, like you're helping kind of work more at the district level, being like, okay, well, how do we form those policies to say, okay, hey, this is a tool that is not going to go away. It's a reality of our times, and trying to just figure out how to kind of establish those guidelines. Is that where you're spending most of your time then?
Yeah, a lot of it's demystifying the tool still, but a lot of our educators are getting beyond the feeling like it's, mind blown. And it is getting to the procedures and policies, but it also is a hyper local thing, Kevin. Like we used to joke, I joke a lot when it comes to red and blue, right? Like the applications for these tools have to be hyper local. I have to build capacity I've been working with Catholic schools, districts south of I-80 near Springfield, Illinois, where I'm at. Then you have the Chicagoland area. We all have different needs, right? We approach education. We're respectful of our stakeholders, of our boards of education, and giving them the tools to be able to figure out teacher-centered tools. And then, like you said, the good teachers are like, wow, if it makes me a better teacher, if it makes me a better administrator, this might make kids better, right? And I think you spoke to this about Scott Miner way back in June or July. I don't remember, when you had that last episode about AI, his 5-minute AI, where we talk about rural districts and the real access to democratization of educational knowledge, right? And I have a lot of smaller districts who are trying to use it as a way to give our kids access, right? And I think those conversations of, once I get to know you and once I get to know the team members, we can really drill down to, what does it look like for you? What does your district stance on this, and how does it impact students? And then right now I'm also working with my district and others, like parent outreach, right, Kevin? Parents need to know that it's not a plagiarism either. It's a new tool to them, almost more new than it is in many cases to students now, because by the time you get to high school, a lot of students have already played with it. Everybody has
Mhm.
Snap. They have their My AI. Teachers don't know it or not, but they've been using it for a year. You just didn't know it. And so having those open conversations and taking those instructional risks to say like, hey guys, like my wife, she happens to be a teacher at a large high school. And she in Chicago public schools, and she had a whole unit on AI. And then she ended with a Socratic seminar. Like, when is it cheating? When is it not cheating? How can you use
Right.
it? And in a very multicultural communities, like where you have 90 different, ethnicities represented and languages and stuff, it's surprising that, if you're not having these conversations at home, then the school is the place to have them, Kevin, because everyone in the next 5 to 10 years will be using it. And I tell this story a lot too. When ChatGPT came out, and there are so many other great multimodal tools now, that's almost like ancient history.
Right.
That class of 2035, which was that first thing, their entire education for the next 13, well, at that time, 13 years is going to be in an AI world. If we're not having conversations with teaching them how to do it right, they're going to be doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Kevin,
Yeah,
they're going to be doing it
and
wrong.
and it is, and it's one of the. You're right. I mean, my kids is kind of just using my parent example of, I got everything from a high schooler down to a 7-year-old second grader, and the high schooler is absolutely using it,
Absolutely.
and I'm sitting here. I'm like, like we always say, like one of the biggest things I want my kids, I want them to be able to be problem solvers and, do
Yeah.
that. So I'm like, okay, but you can't just copy and paste. Like you have to understand it
No.
type of thing. So he's done a good job of like using it kind of as a tool similar to the way like just even Google would have been used before, like Google and
Right.
Wikipedia, but now helping him process and understand and put it into his own words. We're seeing the adjustments that the schools are doing now, where like even this weekend for the first time, he's like, instead of me just writing an essay and bringing it in, now it's prepared where I know what the essay question is, but the assignment is now you have to write the essay in class. And
Yeah. Yes.
and and it's I don't know, like maybe that's a really good way to do it. I don't know if you're seeing kind of like that type of thing to just make sure like are they understanding it and can they put their own thoughts down, knowing that they are using tools like this to help them formulate it.
Yeah, Kevin, one of my implications, and I write about it both in my book and in my workshops, is once you get you struggle with it, you wrestle with some of the academic policies, there's a lot of implications like assessment, right? We used to have the statement in education, which was like, you can't have a Googleable assessment, right? You gotta teach something that's not Googleable. And now I'm like, are your lessons and are your units and exams are they AI-able? And the answer is, I think there's a combination. It's great that you're practicing. The oral exams might be back in sometimes.
Right.
Speeches and things like that, where you take away the screen and then you demonstrate knowledge. But what at the same time, I describe this like iterative process that I always go through with my workshops. It's like you have to teach kids how to use it well. So you start off with, hey, we're going to use like an AI tool with the table of contents and a starting sentence. Okay. And then now students, we're going to, step back and we're going to write our own words. And then you go back to it. And then what you find, and I have a variety of kids. I have 4 kids, and I have a senior who's about to graduate. She hates it. And I have my middle child who's like, hey, and I use it. And then my middle school, I don't even let them know that. But yet, but the reality is, like, you want to have an ongoing conversation, and each teacher has to find their comfort level. And then you want to figure out, like, how does that align to the school policy or the mission or the district policy or mission or the grade level content mission. And then you want to just build this like process of, instead of using the word media literacy, I use the word AI literacy a lot. You have to build some knowledge of it, make sure that they're learning how to use it well, because they're going to use it anyway.
Yeah. So I want to hear, before I go into another topic, because now that I know your background, I want to get another thing. What have been the surprises or the things that you're seeing that you wish just every other kind of school administrator or teacher, kind of things that you're seeing that you just want to make sure that they're recognizing too, because they may not have the viewpoint that you have, talking to everyone about this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was with Jethro Jones's podcast up in September, and we had a conversation about a similar thing. And he told me the story about an old teacher who came up and said, "How can I use this ChatGPT to create a policy so my kids can't use ChatGPT?" Right? It's this double standard. You don't, and I don't like double standards. Him and I joked about it, but the reality is, like, I had another teacher. department chair actually in high school. And she was like, my principal said that we're not allowed to use it because it's cheating for our lesson plans. I'm like, whoa, let me talk to your administrator. Like, why? If it makes you a better teacher, if I can sit there as something, translate it to a different language and diversify some of my primary sources so it's more accessible, I mean, how is that cheating? It makes you better. And I think taking away, Dr. Easton has this great 6 tenets of post-plagiarism. She's from the University of Calgary in Canada. And when I introduce those concepts, then I can start to let's deconstruct that idea of, like I said, plagiarism built up. So I want students, I want districts to like stop having the plagiarism conversation. I want them to think really about how to leverage it in ways that is teacher-centered first. Let your teachers grapple with it. And then eventually you got to have some sort of policies and procedures. My superintendent was like, we'll call it a procedure because a policy. Okay, I don't care what you call it, Kevin. Call it what you want, but we need to have something. And then we want to have the opportunity for kids to use it in every school district so that there isn't that digital divide. The educational technology plan from the U.S. Department of Education just came out about 2 weeks ago. I wrote a blog about it. And one of the things that I talked about was the importance of digital divide. Like the innovative districts that are already doing well are going to leverage it in ways, Kevin, that are going to be amazing for their kids. I want to work with the districts that aren't there yet, because I don't want our kids in urban areas or in rural areas to feel like they can't access what other people are doing. And I had my oldest daughter is going to graduate. I was like, honey, I'm going to like teach you how to use this no matter what, because you're going to be competing in a world where they're going to use it as a tool to leverage and give themselves a step up. And we just need to have that conversation. So you realize you write first, always write first, but use it as a way to improve your writing, use it as a way to improve your presentations, as a thought partner, as an AI assistant, whatever you want to call it. Because it makes you better if you use it well. And every district should be asking personally themselves that, and as a district, how they can make their students and their teachers better with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. And I think we're seeing it kind of at the industry level too, of again, not just, looking at just these AI tools that are out there, everything from doing renderings and drawings and different ways to accelerate something that may have taken 2 weeks that can now be done in 20 minutes, if you put the right inputs into some of these tools. So I think people are recognizing like, wow, there really are some amazing tools. I mean, I see it all the time in what we're doing, just within our company. There's just so many ways you can do that. Hearing your background with Apple, and here we are, we're recording in early February. The next thing that I feel like is going to be dominating the rest of 2024 is now that Apple has come out with their Vision Pro. So yes. I want to hear your take. Have you had a chance to use it? Have you dug into that as far as how that can be used within and what the impact that's going to have within education?
That's a good question. Honestly, we had some ESSER funds where we were applying headsets anyway. The Metaverse, it died officially with ChatGPT. It will resurrect itself again in the next few years after those two technologies meet. And honestly, like if you're looking at that, with the inevitability of the large language models, non-playable characters, there's so many gamification, all these implications, like you said, for industry training, like they're going to collide at some point. But with that, the Apple's, their tool, I think, is in many ways what Apple you would expect, right? Because it totally redoes the interfacing of how you interact with it. It provides an augmented reality. And I think that as the prices come down, I think it's going to have real implications. And I think in secondary education settings specifically, eventually as we get more used to it. And I know Victory XR does some great work with content, which won't be Apple, but like just being able to give kids the opportunity to dissect a cell virtually, right? And labs where you don't have to do it. And so I think inevitably in the next few years, we're going to see a collision course. And I think that Apple has done a good job of providing a model for us to get to a place where we can use those in school well. But there's always implications of pricing and cybersecurity. But I think it'll do a really good job. And I think it already has done a great job in higher ed and some of the, industry training, where we're going to be able to use it to give our kids awesome experiences, not just field trips, but awesome experiences to give them some real skills. And I'm glad that the Pro is out for us to see. I haven't actually tried it. Have you, Kevin,
Yeah,
tried
I
it yet?
have. I've had a chance to play
You're
around with
amazing.
it a lot.
Tell me about it.
All right, so
Tell me
I'll
about
give
it.
you
How
my
does it
take
do
on
it?
it, because
Yeah,
I
let's
was
go.
one, like when Meta came out with theirs, I tried it too, and I'm like, I just want to see where the technology is and start thinking about, like, all right,
Right.
where can this be used in, and corporate side and then education side. And my takeaway was I played around with it and then I put it aside and I didn't use it. And I feel like anyone who's used it, again, it's been primarily used for gaming on that Meta
Right.
world of it. And I'm sure there's been kind of different applications, and I'm sure we'll find, later on, there's been a lot of teachers and companies using it for different ways. But my thought was always, there's no way schools are going to trust Meta. And part of the issue is the second you put it on there, you got to create your Facebook account,
Exactly.
And I'm like, so they missed it. So if anyone's going to do this, it's Apple. I mean, Apple's got
Absolutely.
the trust. I mean, there's already the trust. We already have all, the iPads and MacBooks. They have that long history of investing in education. So I've been really waiting for this one to come out and see, all right, can it work? And I'll just start with technology. It is unbelievably impressive, the technology.
Okay.
It is,
I haven't heard it firsthand.
It is so good that it's scary, like how good it is. You really don't, like, when you have it on. In a lot of ways, like, I just started wearing glasses because I'm getting old. So I feel like I'm a little bit of tunnel vision when I put my glasses on anyway, but it tracks your eyes. Like, the eye movement is like the main way that things are selected. And then there's no controller. So it's all just fingers pinching fingers. So depending on where you're looking at and pinching it, and you don't have to, like, hold it up to the screen. Like, you can literally have this where your fingers are just kind of resting, like, whether you're, standing or sitting, and you can do that. And then if you do two, you can do your Zoom, like, it's so natural that, like, the learning curve is within minutes that you put them on. And even though they say it's not for use for kids under 12, I put on my 7-year-old and she's running with it within minutes.
Right.
And the fact that because it is this augmented view, it's like they're not checked out of the room. Like, they can see us, I can see them. So the technology is just really unbelievable how you do that. And to your point, the price point, I think, will come down, which is going to make it way more affordable. And then it's just limitless on the apps. Like, I think once these developers get in here and start doing the apps that are available, to me, I just look at anything that's really expensive to do in school. This is now a reality. Like, to your point, if you're doing dissections, if, like, my son puts it on and he's found an app where you can put an F1 race car in your living room right in front of you, and you can pick up pieces and you can take things apart and look at how it's done. So I feel like the technology is absolutely there. It's now, it's going to be now just, letting how the teachers and how the districts are going to utilize this. The piece that I would like to see more is more of the social interaction. That piece of it, I'm not sure where that will go, because
and that's kind of that's my dystopian reality. Like, Kevin, I already know, like, HoloLens was an amazing tool anyways, the way they were doing it. But I know when I was at Apple Park, and we've had Apple products before, every school pretty much has had some version of it. Their iPad interactive augmented reality stuff was already high quality, right? You could crawl into the lunar module. You could do a lot of things. And I'm really glad to hear from firsthand, not just through, like, pundits and people who've tried it on that I don't know, that it's as worth as it is, because I knew, this is going to revolutionize, along with large language models, everything when it comes to, like, socializing and all those things. But the one thing I'm worried about is the education will become, in the next few years, as expensive as it is, that people are going to just dump headsets in front of kids, and they're going to have to stay at home in certain settings, and they're going to have to learn alone with, like, one teacher to 200 kids. And that's the scary part that I see when it comes to budgets and, future shortfalls of finances. And of course, the haves will always be able to have their great schools and their great education. But I just see this as it has to be social, like you said.
Yeah.
You has to conclude that social aspect.
Yeah, and that's a piece I just haven't seen yet, but my guess is somebody's going to work on that and try to figure out a way to do that. If it's not already there, there may be some things that are there, and I just haven't seen that piece of it yet. Because right now it does feel like it's kind of like a solo type of thing. You put it on,
right,
and like we did learn, like you can now like at least like mirror the screen so other people can see what you see. Which is good, but it still feels like you're kind of like watching one kid play a video game.
It's like Nomad
type of thing. Like it brought me back to my college days where like, you stand around and there's a couple people playing a video game. And I never wanted to be the person who's never watching other people play video games.
No, so, you wanted to be the game.
Yeah, I didn't want to be a gamer. I wanted to be far away from the game.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I think that you did mention something, Kevin, when it comes to companies and innovations. And we actually ended up going with a different set of headsets that we're learning how to leverage in different ways. But we needed to have that remote view. Our coaches, our teachers need to see what the students are. We were losing instructional time if it wasn't adjusted correctly for the learning experience. So it is a definite emerging field. I'm going to love to watch it grow. Yeah. I knew Apple, they always execute wonderful products at the end user. So I really appreciate that insight, and I'm looking forward to having it more applicable soon.
Yeah. And I'm excited to hear, like once, the educators start getting it and start putting their lens to it, because my take is, like I knew Apple would have a good take on it, but I did not expect them to be this far along kind of in their first version. Like I pull out kind of like the first iPod I had or anything like that. I'm like, wow, that evolved really fast. And I'm like, if this is their starting point, it's going to be really, really cool to watch. So, All right. Well, Micah, anything I didn't ask that I should be asking about?
No, Kevin, it's always a pleasure to do. I do like the fact that even your listeners, some of them focus on learning spaces. And I think it begs the question, what should our learning spaces look like if I already don't need a traditional classroom, if I can use, AR, VR, if I'm able to use my own personal tutor, so to speak, and I think that as, budgets are able, I think it's really important that we start rethinking a factory model of desks, classrooms, and rotations. And so I'm glad companies like yours are, and the people are listening are focusing on, what does that reinvention look like? And how do I connect the emerging technologies and the virtual spaces with physical spaces so we continue to have that socialization? And then, of course, AI is iterations. Like we're only on round 2 now with the multimodals. I think I'm looking forward to a future where we have good safeguards that can teach, and help our kids. So thanks for letting me talk about things I'm passionate about, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, that's great. For the listeners, if you are not a subscriber, hit that wherever you're listening, just hit the subscribe button or go to betterlearningpodcast.com. We will put Micah's information and links in the show notes here, and obviously it'll be on the website. We're always trying to get more topics and just make sure different areas are represented. So we get a lot of ideas and recommendations from the form that we have on the website. So we just really appreciate how active kind of our listeners are. Like we always say, this is a community where we're just trying to help everyone create those opportunities, because at the end of the day, everyone wants that best opportunity for every kid. So Micah, great talking to you. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Have a great day, Kevin.
The views and opinions expressed in the Better Learning Podcast are those of myself as an individual and of my guest, and do not necessarily represent the organizations we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.